Francine, you'll say go.
All set.
Thank you. Roll call, I'll call Ralph Engel,
Ralph, here.
Elizabeth Cooney,
Yes.
Ira Block,
Yeah, here.
Ron Mandel. Ron, unmute.
Here.
Sarah Dunn,
Here.
Ed Papazian,
Here.
John Cuddy.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and would the members or professional staff please introduce themselves and to explain what their roles are?
Rob Wasp, Town Engineer, Technical Review of Applications.
Anthony Oliveri, Town Consulting Engineer, also Technical Review, Engineering Review.
Hank Menkes.
Lisa Hoffman, Counsel
oh,
to
I'm
the
sorry.
Planning Board.
Hank,
Hank Menkes, RF Consulting Engineer to the board.
Francine,
Francine Brill, Secretary.
okay, excuse me. My name is Ralph Engel. I'm the chairman of the Town of Mamaroneck Planning Board. The public hearing tonight will be conducted in accordance with the governor's executive orders number 202.1 and 201.15 as extended, which allow this hearing to take place remotely via Zoom. The notice provided to the members of the public included instructions as to how to view and participate in this meeting. This will be a public hearing. This meeting is being broadcast live on LMC TV, which is channel 35 on FiOS and channel 76 on Optimum. It is also live online on lmctv.org. I note for the record that one of the members of the planning board, John Cuddy, has recused himself from this matter. Francine, could you please confirm that this meeting's public hearing has been duly noticed, if that is the case?
Yes, it's been duly noticed.
Okay. Tonight's public hearing will cover an application to do two things. One of which is to erect a cell tower that looks sort of like a very tall tree on the Bonnie Briar Country Club property, about 400 feet from Weaver Street. And the other of which is for Verizon to place its cell antennas on that pole. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide all potentially affected residents an opportunity to comment and to ask questions about this application. Although, excuse me, although the applicant's team is present, all questions and comments must be directed to the planning board and not to anybody else. We will pass them on to others if that's appropriate to do. We want to make sure that everyone who wishes to speak this evening has an opportunity to be heard. Please thus be respectful of your neighbors, and please keep your questions and comments brief. Depending upon the number of people who sign up to, and we may have to limit the length of comments and questions. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name for the record, and please also state whether or not you are a resident of the town of Mamaroneck. If you wish, you may add your street address or the name of your neighborhood. Those of you who wish to submit your comments via email can do so. Comments should be sent to, let me spell it out, PUBLICQC, repeat, PUBLICQC at townofmamaroneckny.org. Town of Mamaroneck being all one word. Okay. Please also note that we have a staff member who will be monitoring emails coming in during this hearing and will read them into the record of the hearing. Should you wish to call into this hearing, that can be done by telephone, the number of which is 1-646-888-8255. 876-9923. Repeat, 1-646-876-9923. The applicant's attorney will now, and the rest of his crew, will now be admitted to this meeting, and he will introduce himself and the members of his crew and present a summary of the pending application.
Thanks, Ralph. I'm going to admit the applicant's team to the meeting. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to add on to your statement that any of those in the public using their phones to call on, you will need the meeting ID and password. The webinar ID is 886-9671-9539. The passcode is 736755. I'm now going to admit the team.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. For the record, again, my name is David Kenny. I'm an attorney with Snyder & Snyder. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless. My team tonight is Bob Burns, the applicant's engineer, Gary Hartman, the applicant's radio frequency engineer, and Matt Allen. He's the expert that prepared the visual resource assessment, the photo simulations of the proposed facility. I'd like to share my screen. I'm going to show a layout of the facility on the site plan. Begin by discussing where the facility is located on the property. As the chairman stated, it's approximately 400 feet from Weaver Street. It's located in an area on the golf course that has an existing maintenance yard. This allows us to put the facility in an area that's already disturbed, as well as allowing us to use an existing access drive that's being used for the maintenance area today. So this limits the ability of disturbance and also provides a good location that is at least 400 feet away from the property line, from the nearest residence. And the facility is designed to have co-location space. So even though the facility will provide space for Verizon's equipment, we do know that we have a letter of interest from AT&T. So if this facility is approved, AT&T will also co-locate at this facility. So even though the facility and this application tonight is for Verizon's approval, we did design the facility to support the additional co-location of up to 3 additional carriers, as well as future municipal equipment. One, I think, of the benefits of this application is that we provided a large amount of backup power for the generator that supplies to this facility. In the event that there's a power outage, we have a storage tank that can provide up to 260 hours of backup power. And of course, that can be refilled, but that 10-day window of backup power on site and being a backup power source that we can control will make sure that this facility is being able to be used in the event of a power failure, so that when people are relying on these services most, we can be able to provide these services. Again, the facility is designed to resemble a tree. The antennas will be fitted with inside the tree. We do have photo simulations of the facility that I'll show, which has a better visual representation of it. But this is just for design purposes. There'd be Verizon antennas up here at the top, and then the co-location carriers would go below. Again, the branches, we've worked with the town to lower the branches to the lowest height we can without it becoming a structural issue. But the branches are now just only 40 feet off the ground. And with a 125-foot facility to the top of the branches, approximately 2/3 of the facility is going to be these faux branches. So it's a really good stealth design. I'm going to stop the screen share for this. I'm going to show the radio frequency report, the RF justification report to show why we have a need for this facility. Thank you. So Verizon's radio frequency engineers, VCOM, our expert, Gary Hartman, is here tonight. We can answer any questions regarding this report. But we provided a second report after we received some comments from the board's own wireless consultant. And included in that, we did what is known as a drive test analysis. And we're showing here areas where we actually had an RF engineer drive around existing streets in the town of Mamaroneck and surrounding areas. And the areas in green are shown as areas that lack reliable coverage today. I'm sure many people would attest that a lot of the driving in these areas, your cell phone service will go out, especially if you're a Verizon customer. We did also have propagation maps that show what the potential coverage is today. So this is at a 700 megahertz band. This is the existing coverage today. Gary, could you just briefly explain what is being shown here in this map?
Yes, this is showing the existing coverage of the sites that surround the various, the proposed site here, which is the yellow pin. The sites that are the red pins are the existing Verizon sites. So this is showing the coverage at 700. I would move down to the 2100 page. As you can see, the higher frequency you get, the less coverage you get out of the existing sites. And I would also kind of state that Verizon's main spectrum in the PCS and AWS band is about 4/5 of the spectrum that they will be operating in this. So this is probably more indicative of the coverage that you would see.
Would you say at the 21 megahertz band that's higher data, higher capacity, which is why it's a shorter distance propagated from the facility?
Yes, it's actually higher frequency, but there's a lot more spectrum that Verizon has in the higher bands.
And so now I want to show, we do have radio frequency coverage maps showing what the proposed coverage will be. This is the 700 megahertz at the proposed height. The 117 feet is the center line height of the antenna. Can you just briefly explain what the coverage objectives show in this map?
Yes, the coverage objectives show that at 700, we're trying to fill the smaller hole that you see in the previous map that you displayed. But if you look down at the 2100 map, which is, I believe, below that, you can see if you lay the two plots, I think it's down one, is it? This is, what is it?
21, it's 117.
Yeah, 117. If you look at this map and you lay it on the map of the existing coverage, it fits quite well within the gaps that exist in the 2100 megahertz.
So essentially with this coverage, we've filled in the areas in the previous maps where we show a lack of reliable coverage.
Yes, we do. Now, does it fill in every nook and cranny? No. This is real world. You don't get perfect fill-ins, but it does do a very good job of filling in the coverage gap that exists.
And it meets the coverage objectives of Verizon Wireless.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. And as part of this application review, the board retained its own wireless consultant. The consultant reviewed these maps and found that there is a need for this facility and that there is justification for the height proposed. We also submitted with our application what is known as an FCC compliance report. That is a radio frequency emissions report. It showed that the worst case scenarios, if all of the carriers were operating at this facility and operating at maximum power, at worst case, it would still only be 6% of the FCC limit. So thereby the facility is deemed safe by the FCC with regarding to radio frequency emissions. Again, the board is reminded that it cannot base its decision on the radio frequency emissions effect on health or its perceived impact on health. However, we did submit a report that shows that this facility would be 100% within the threshold level. And it's a really low power facility where showing only at worst case scenarios being 6%.
Let me just explain to anybody of the public that Mr. Menkes will be reporting after Mr. Kenny speaks. He is our consultant with respect to all of this, and he will be giving his report, which may or may not match exactly what's said now. But in any event, the town does have its own expert, and he will be speaking shortly when Mr. Kenny is finished.
Sure. The next thing I would like to show is we did a visual resource assessment. If I can just share the screen. And so what we did here is we did a balloon test, and we did different photos from around various viewpoints. Matt Allen, could you briefly explain what can be shown in this view shed map right here?
Yes, the view shed map very simply identifies the geographic areas where you would reasonably expect to be able to see the top of the tower or the high point of the tower. So it factors in existing vegetation and existing topography. So the areas identified in purple are the areas where the top of the tower would be visible above vegetation and structures, as well as topography. So the largest area of impact is within the boundary of the Bonnie Briar Country Club. And there are some areas surrounding, but they're very limited. And that's largely due to the dense forest coverage that's found throughout much of this area.
Can you also explain the different squares and what the different squares show?
Sure. Each one of those squares, the red, orange, and green, are locations where we took photographs. As David mentioned, we did a balloon visibility study. We floated a balloon up to the high point of the proposed tower and then drove around and looked for where the balloon was visible from. We did some advance work before we did the balloon study and worked with the municipality to identify locations that they would like to have us visit to test visibility. We also picked locations based on the view shed analysis, that is areas where visibility was determined to be likely based on the predictive model of the view shed analysis. And we also stopped and took photographs where we spotted the balloon just in doing our drive-by. So the different colored squares on the view shed map, green indicates places where the balloon was visible above vegetation or through clear openings in trees. Orange indicates areas where the balloon was visible through trees. The balloon test was done during leaf off season. So we had benefit of being able to see through trees the way that the visibility would exist for approximately half the year. And red are locations we visited where we did not find visibility. We visited those places either because they were recommended by the municipality, or we visited those places because they are in residential areas where we expected we would get questions about visibility.
Thank you, Matt. And the photo simulations we did of certain viewpoints where we saw the balloon, and then we were able to show what the facility might look like. I think the photo simulations speak for themselves. It's a really good stealth design. In many views, using the tree will have the facility, I believe, blend in with the existing trees in the background and in the forefront of many views of the facility. But I'm just going through some of the views right now and showing what the stealth design is going to look like. So there's like a before and then an after. As the board said, we're here tonight to really receive public comments and to hear from the public. I do want to thank the board again. We've gone through many late night meetings to review this application. So I do appreciate you accommodating us on a special meeting tonight, giving us the benefit of going first and hearing from the public who will have their first opportunity to speak on this application.
Thank you. May we now turn to Mr. Menkes?
Absolutely.
Anything further to add at this point?
No, please turn to Mr. Menkes.
Mr. Menkes, could you please give your credentials and a summary of your report? You're muted, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. My name is Ralph, as indicated, is Hank Menkes. I'm the president of Menkes Associates LLC, which is a consulting company that provides wireless technology consulting to municipalities and legal teams. We do not do any work for the service providers. I have over 35 years working in radio and RF engineering. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in electrical engineering with a focus in communications theory from Northeastern University and business education from Carnegie Mellon University. I started my career with Bell Laboratories in microwave radio. And prior to forming my own company, I was the chief technical officer for Alcatel-Lucent's wireless business division. In that capacity, I was responsible for the company's 4G wireless strategy, for overseeing our standards submissions to the global standards organizations, and I was the interface to the technical press and analysts community. Prior to that, I was with Lucent Technologies as their Vice President of Global Systems Engineering and Architecture for the wireless business division, where I had responsibility for all of the technical requirements and architecture for their wireless infrastructure products. I also oversaw in that capacity a team of RF engineers that were responsible for preparing the RF engineering guidelines that Lucent provided to its customers to assist them in the deployment of these new digital technologies, as well as to do any of the unique RF engineering deployments and system optimizations as they were rolling out our product. As I indicated, I started my career with Bell Laboratories. I have published dozens of technical papers in the industry journals and magazines and presented those papers at forums around the globe. I have 5 US and international patents, and I was recognized as a Bell Labs Fellow for my contributions.
Thank you.
All right, let me go through my readout. I was asked by the board to review the material that was submitted by the applicant. And in the process of doing that, I reviewed the town code section 240-19.1, which is applicable for telecommunications facilities, and the documents that were submitted in support of the application from Pinnacle Telecom Group, which was dated January 2nd of 2020, which, as Mr. Kenny indicated, covered the radiation issues, and 3 reports from VCOM Telecommunications Engineering dated June 22nd, September 8th, and October 12th, all of this year. Now, as Mr. Kenny indicated, AT&T has expressed interest in being a co-locator on this tower, and Mr. Kenny submitted some technical documents from AT&T indicating their justification for this installation as well. But since AT&T is not a co-applicant in this application, I did not consider any of that material in coming to my conclusions with regard to this application. The proposed cell site is to be located, as indicated, at 808 Weaver Street in Larchmont on the Bonnie Briar Golf Club property. It would be associated with a 120-foot monopine tower and 4 sectors of camouflaged antennas. I'd like to first address the coverage issues. Mr. Kenny went into some of these already. Verizon currently has, from what I could see in the maps and plots that they provided, 6 cell sites that circumscribe the area under consideration, and specifically that area includes, according to the VCOM report, the Sheldrake Environmental Center, the Bonnie Briar Golf Club, several structures along Route 125, and some adjacent small roads. So that is the area under consideration. Verizon submitted through VCOM a number of computer-generated predictive coverage plots at both 700 megahertz and 2100 megahertz, along with actual measured drive test data of the existing network. The drive test data and the predicted coverage plots agreed pretty well, at least within expected accuracy. They're never perfect because of the different measuring systems and different bin size and so forth, but they do agree. In fact, as I mentioned once before, some of the drive test data actually shows coverage that is less reliable than the predicted plots. What these plots show is the existing coverage in the area under consideration does not meet Verizon's receive signal strength requirement of -95 dBm for reliable in-building communications. Now, the number -95 dBm is a measure of the reference signal receive power, which is a characteristic of the LTE system that Verizon is employing for their 4G system. This number, -95, is consistent with what Verizon is using in other municipalities with similar morphology in the area. So there is consistency there. Unfortunately, there was no way to determine whether the existing coverage meets Verizon's in-vehicle or on-street coverage requirements, since the plots only showed a single threshold of either less than or greater than -95 dBm. The less than reliable in-building coverage isn't surprising, because when you look at the location of the existing Verizon cell sites, they really have no cell site that is close to the area under consideration. And the topography of the area and the clutter being the man-made and natural impediments on the ground limit the propagation of the RF signal. So I am not surprised to see the results that these plots are indicating. The addition of the proposed cell site and tower on Weaver Street effectively supplements the existing coverage at both 700 and 2100 megahertz, allowing the receive signal strength to meet or exceed Verizon's -95 dB requirement in the area. Now, is this the best location for a proposed new cell site? Unfortunately, the answer to that question is less definitive. The search ring that Verizon presented is relatively quite large for a search ring, and actually covers land area outside the jurisdiction of Mamaroneck. So from an RF standpoint, there may be other alternative locations that would satisfy Verizon's requirement. There are locations, for example, with higher elevations that might be advantageous. However, Verizon didn't provide any coverage plots from these alternative locations to be able to make any judgment as to how they would cover the area. There's another thing to consider, though, that many of these alternative locations are impractical because they fall within a residential area, which doesn't make them attractive. And in other cases, they fall in the middle of the fairway of the golf course. So in my opinion, the location at 808 Weaver Street on the Bonnie Briar Golf Club is a reasonable location from the material that's been presented to locate this proposed cell site. It addresses both the coverage at 700 megahertz and at 2100 megahertz. Now, with regard to the tower height, there's another question there: is the appropriate height 117 feet? So the applicant submitted, as Mr. Kenny indicated, additional plots at 20 feet below that proposed height and 20 feet above that height. Now, why they chose 20 feet is not clear. I suspect it in part because AT&T has indicated interest in the 107-foot location on the tower, which would be 10 feet below Verizon's location. In any event, if you look at the coverage provided at 97 feet, it's clearly visible that that coverage is less than satisfactory in order to address the area under consideration. However, if you look at the coverage at 137 feet, it's a sort of a different story. You could quite easily, in my opinion, see that there is more blue coloring on the plot, indicating that there is slightly increased coverage at 137 feet. The question, however, is whether that coverage is really of any significance. And the reason why I say that is that the applicant didn't, unfortunately, present any plots that showed the integrated coverage at 137 feet with the existing network. So it was not possible to determine whether there was coverage overlap with the existing surrounding cell sites from the material. I personally believe that with the topography in the area that you are not going to gain significant coverage by going up 20 feet. In addition, a 120-foot pine tree looks a bit strange. Now, with regard to the exposure limits, as Mr. Kenny indicated, the FCC has a requirement that before any broadcaster can start transmitting, they have to meet certain exposure limits established by the Federal Communications Commission. So the applicant submitted a report from Pinnacle Telecom Group that did an extensive job of calculating the maximum exposure limit from this cell site in a worst case situation. That report did a very thorough analysis, assuming that the tower would be fully loaded with 4 carriers, all transmitting at 100% power on all of their frequencies 100% of the time. Now, that is a very improbable situation. And as Mr. Kenny indicated, the resulting exposure was only 6%. It was actually slightly less than 6% of the federal limit. So exposure is not an issue, at least with regard to the FCC's requirements. And once again, it's important to understand that federal requirements supersede any requirements that the municipality might establish. And as Mr. Kenny has clearly indicated, the municipality is not in a position to turn down a cell site if it meets the federal emissions requirements. So RF considerations cannot be used to deny a cell site application. So the bottom line is that, in my professional opinion, that the proposed cell site in the tower at 808 Weaver Street is justified to supply improved coverage in the area under consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Kenny, one question. Am I correct that in addition to the cell company antennas, there will also be emergency service antennas for the emergency services of the town of Mamaroneck on that tower?
So as I stated earlier, yes, the facility has been designed to provide space for municipal emergency communication equipment. We understand that the town is reviewing the potential for this facility and has some interest, but we'll make that available to them later down the road. And we've offered to make that available at rent-free.
And I remember it also installation free, correct?
Absolutely. We'll also do the installation for them. They just have to provide us the equipment that meets their requirements.
Okay, absolutely. Okay. One item of other business for this evening. There's one item which will come on after this hearing that deals with determination on a different application as to which the public hearing was closed on the November 11th. So we're aware that that is on the agenda as the second and only other item. Mr. Menkes has to leave our meeting before 8:30, so that once we open the public hearing to the public, which will be momentary, it would be appreciated if people with questions that relate to what he covered or him looking to open the public hearing, please.
Before we open the public hearing, can I direct a specific query to Mr. Menkes?
Sure.
I listened intently to your remarks and I read your report. And I have also been listening to advertisements on the television and in the newspaper. I didn't hear you mention the magic words 5G. Why is that?
I didn't mention it because there was no mention in the applicant's report of establishing any 5G services from this facility at this time of the application.
And in your professional opinion, what significance, if any, is there to the absence of such information or proposal?
Well, I think I think that question is probably better asked of the applicant first, and then I would give you my response. Believe that we discussed the last time at the last meeting that 5G is coming. There's no question about it. It's starting to appear here in New Jersey. Verizon is putting it up in Morristown. Now, as to the specific equipment that Verizon is going to utilize for 5G in terms of antennas and remote radio heads on the tower, I think that might be best answered by the applicant. But it certainly would have an impact on the emissions report. But the amount of additional emissions would be so small that if it went from 6% to 7%, I would be surprised.
So I can clearly answer that. The gap in service that's in this area is a 4G LTE service gap. So that's why Verizon is proposing to fill it with the 4G LTE services. So 5G may come down the road. However, this application is for 4G LTE services and to fill the gap in that network.
Well, assuming that 5G does come, does that not to some degree supersede earlier generation of service?
So no, they'll still work in connection. You'll still have to have the macro services and the 5G services. We have our RF engineer who can speak to this, but from my understanding, these large sites, these we'll call them macro sites, they're not going away anywhere. In fact, they'll probably do more of the voice communication services on these sites where maybe 5G might have more of data packets and voice over LTE or something.
Are you suggesting that this tower may be less than ideally suited to handle the protocols or equipment associated with 5G?
I'm stating that right now that the need for this facility is on the 4G LTE network, and that's what this facility will provide. I'm stating in the future when 5G comes that these facilities will still be needed. When we used 4G LTE, you still had 3G generation technology out there. They work together. They don't immediately replace one another. But Gary, if you would like to expand on that.
Yes, 5G is a pretty broad term. It's kind of difficult to project in the future exactly what will happen if and when Verizon decides to put 5G at this site. For example, there's a large auction that's going to happen in next month, auctioning off 280 megahertz of spectrum below 6 gigahertz. It is rumored that Verizon will be an active participant. So 5G for that site may actually look very different than a 5G that's being deployed in a dense urban environment like Manhattan. The equipment will be different. It'll just be different stuff. So it's really hard at this point to actually pin down what a 5G would look like at this site. My estimation is that everything going on the macro sites will exist in what is known as the FR1 frequency range, which is 6 gigahertz and less. The FR2 stuff is going to be used as spot coverage for events in dense urban areas, of which this is, of course, not a dense urban area. So that equipment will be very different than the stuff that operates below 6 gigahertz.
But Gary, in your professional opinion, this facility, if approved and constructed, it'll be needed for a long time for the network.
There is still 3G. It's not being put at this site, but Verizon is still maintaining 3G sites at this point. They may start pulling them out in the next year or so, but yes, it's been almost a decade-long transition from 3G to 4G. And I would expect that kind of transition between 4G and 5G.
But not only the actual antenna equipment, but the infrastructure that's being provided also has the potential to stay for a long time.
Absolutely, because you need infrastructure like this to put radiating or elements up to do RF coverage, whether it's 5G or 4G or 3G or even the original analog systems. You need infrastructure like this to do that. And you need the density and the coverage that you need for the data communication services that are being desired and ever increasing by the public.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing that ties into this, and that is that it is highly likely that if the board decides to approve this, that in any such resolution, we will cover the removal of the tower and its infrastructure in the event it is not being used for a period of time, including a requirement of bonding to make sure it actually happens in the unlikely event that Verizon and Homeland disappear on us, but nothing's impossible. So all of that is being contemplated because someday, maybe after some of us aren't here anymore, that tower probably will not be needed, and we have to have a way to make sure it can be removed again.
And the
Ira,
applicant would agree to such a condition.
Thank you.
Ira, can I have an opportunity to answer your question now that the applicant has spoken?
Sure.
5G is an interesting technology, and this is my own personal opinion. It is a solution looking for a problem to solve. It's clear why it was created because knowing how the standards bodies operate globally, I can say with confidence that it's part of the march forward, but it isn't going to displace the existing technology, as both Mr. Hartman and Mr. Kenny have indicated. 5G right now, I believe Verizon has 2.3 gigahertz, 2300 megahertz is their 5G frequency, if I remember correctly. And 5G is not currently being utilized at frequencies below that. T-Mobile has 600 megahertz possibility, Verizon does not. So the majority of Verizon's voice traffic, voice over LTE, is likely to continue for quite a period of time on the existing equipment that Verizon is deploying. 5G will more than likely be utilized for high-speed data services, and it's finding the majority of its applications in the enterprise arena at this point in time, with a lot of private networks. So I think Mr. Hartman was correct in saying that it's yet to be determined what Verizon will do in the future with 5G at this facility. So I don't see the infrastructure that's being deployed on this tower disappearing anytime soon.
I would like to correct one thing. The 2300 is actually AT&T spectrum. That's the
Oh, I'm
WCS band.
Oh, good, thank you. Because I deal with so many service providers, it's hard to keep them straight. I know T-Mobile's got 25, I think. And
T-Mobile has 25, and they have a lot of spectrum that they
Yes.
obtain from Sprint,
Yes.
which is why everyone is predicting that Verizon and AT&T will have to buy a lot of spectrum at the upcoming auction.
Makes sense. Ira, any further at this point?
No, I just want to make sure I correctly distilled all this. Would either of you who responded to my query disagree that the essence is that this application has essentially nothing to do with 5G? And if we'd never heard of 5G, the application would be the same, and the proposed use and in technology, things get superseded over time, but for the foreseeable future, this should be a valuable resource. And for those of us who are Verizon subscribers and live in the area, we might actually be able to use our cell phones at home soon.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with
You
that.
I suspect there are many members of the audience who are more or less in the same situation as I described. So maybe you've made them feel good also.
Yeah, try driving down Weaver Street and not losing your connection. So it's for real. At this point, can we, is there any other member of the planning board who wants to say anything, or can we open the meeting to the public? And if so, may I have a motion to do that, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the public hearing is now open. Rob, what do you take it from here?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the public that are in the meeting, you can use the raise your hand function to alert us that you want to speak. Once we go one at a time, we will admit you to the meeting as a panelist, and you'll be able to share your screen in addition to being heard. I will also be monitoring the town's email account, which is on my bottom of my avatar. It's publiccq@town.gov. townmamaroneckny.org. If you prefer to send an email to that account, I can also read that aloud for you into the record. I'm going to check if anybody in the attendees group has a hand raised at this time. I'm not seeing anybody just yet, but I'm going to go ahead and read one email that we did receive. We received a email from Mr. Jared Kuzin earlier today. He states that I fully support the Bonnie Breyer cell phone application. As a resident of Sackett Drive, this is an extremely necessary proposed tower for public's health and safety. I would be happy to speak in support of this application if given the opportunity.
Okay, let me also point out that we have received 10 separate letters from people generally in the fairly close to Bonnie Breyer, all of which have supported this application and all of which are being put into the record of the application, but there's no need to read them all out. But unlike the email, which we haven't heard before, but the letters have been circulated. At this point, is there anybody else or can we move on?
At this point, I do see a few hands raised. I'm just going to start in no particular order at the top of the list. I will be promoting Mr. Joe Napolitano. Joe, please let us know once you're in.
He's the
Good
general
evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for hosting this meeting tonight. I would just like to say, as the general manager of Bonnie Breyer, just talk about a situation that happened not too long ago with a very violent storm where a tree came down, took out our upper terrace, but it also took out our telephone system. And that phone system was down for about a week. And the scary thing about it was that we had no communication, we had no internet, and God forbid, in the event that there was an emergency out in the middle of the golf course, due to lack of cell service, we had no way of contacting the emergency services. So as a general manager who is responsible for the safety of our membership and the safety of our guests and our employees, I am in favor of this application and hope the board sees to approve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, I see another hand raised. The next person is Janice Gelward. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Ms. Gelward, you're muted.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for taking my comments. I live on Althea Lane, which is directly across from the all famous sledding hill at Bonnie Breyer. And I've lived here for about 17 years. And before that, I lived on West Drive, which is just on the other side of the Leatherstocking Trail, basically the same neighborhood. Up until this summer, I really just felt it was an inconvenience not to be able to have cell service. And a little annoyed that basically with Verizon, that I had to keep a landline. I mean, nobody has landlines anymore, except for the people that live around here. And it made it very uncomfortable when I was taking calls from doctors because they always call you on your cell. And to get dropped or broken off or not be able to hear what they're saying was quite annoying. But after the storm we had this summer, Isaias, I believe it was, we were out for 2 weeks, I believe it was. No cell service, no landline, no internet, nothing. I would have to drive to town and hope to catch a signal there. I have grown children, grandchildren, none of which live here. I'd like to keep in touch with them. I don't know if anything's going on with them. I would have to wait until I could call them from town. I felt very uncomfortable not being able to call emergency or get in touch with anybody during this time. It really was uncomfortable. So I was very happy to hear that this was being a consideration, well needed, long time coming. In addition, my husband happens to be a doctor. We have at least 2 other physicians in my immediate area. And it's important for them to be able to be reached and to be able to contact patients, which they're not able to do with their cell phones. Or rarely. It's hard it's not reliable at all. So if in the storm, your landline goes down, you have nothing, and no internet, you have nothing. And so this is very disheartening. It's very upsetting to me. So I am very much in favor of putting up this tower. I am excited. I wish it was years ago. So thank you for the consideration, and I hope it goes through. And thank you for all the really good work and studies that you did. It seems very thoughtful.
Rob?
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is David Tulchin. I will be promoting you to the meeting.
Mr. Tolchin, you are muted.
Mr. Tulchin, please let us know once you've established your audio connection.
Does that do it? Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Yes.
Great. Sorry about the muting. Good evening, Chairman Engel and the other members of the Planning Board. Thank you for conducting this public hearing. I reside in the town of Mamaroneck at 14 Rochelle Road. I'm also a member of the Bonnie Briar Country Club. As you've heard in the letters that you've received and you've heard from other speakers, the cell tower is highly important. It's highly important to those of us at Bonnie Briar for 2 reasons. As the chairman noted earlier, there is no cell service or very inadequate cell service as you drive up Weaver Street. And the same is true in the grounds of Bonnie Briar. There are many places where there is literally no service. That is at times an inconvenience. But much more importantly than inconvenience is the safety issue. We had an incident a year or 2 ago on the golf course where one of our golfers, somebody in his 80s, collapsed on the course. As it turned out, it was not a heart attack and he was fine. But there was no way to reach emergency services other than to send someone scrambling as fast as possible back to the clubhouse to make a phone call to the volunteer ambulance corps. So the safety issue is really of great importance to those of us who are members of Bonnie Briar and who play golf regularly on our course. So I won't belabor this any further. If you have questions of me, I'm happy to answer them, of course. But many residents of the town, particularly those who live close by, as Mrs. Geldwart, the Geldwarts are not members of Bonnie Briar, but I know they live close to Weaver Street. And many residents of the town have had the unfortunate occasion of losing self-service on Weaver Street. Those who live close often have no service or inadequate service. And as Joe Napolitano said earlier, on the rare occasions when power is down, this cell tower will have emergency generators that will permit those of us at the club to use cell phones. So in sum, the tower is important. I think it's necessary, and I, like many others, am in favor.
Thank you very much, sir. Rob?
1 second. Okay, I will now be promoting Rupert Walters as to be a panelist. Please do let us know once you've established your audio connection. As a reminder for all speakers, if you so wish to share your camera, feel free to do so that you can fully participate in the hearing.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Rupert Walters, and I reside in Larchmont at Hickory Grove Drive East. And I'm also, as David Tulchin just mentioned, a member of Bonnie Briar. I've lived in Larchmont since 1978, first on Murray Avenue and now on Hickory Grove Drive. The cell service has been sporadic at best at Hickory Grove Drive West. This, I believe, will help the cell service in my part of Larchmont at this point. But also, I have friends who have been had real difficulty. We've had through the time we've been here several times when we lost landlines, and you couldn't get through. And it's not just here; it's all. It sounds like Mr. Engel, you have experienced what I have along Weaver Street, that you inevitably lose a conversation, and that could be, it's not so important for me whether it's business or personal, but I think about the men that are driving the ambulances or the police department or all the emergency services that lose that connection and then try to get back through business signal. So yes, there's an economic interest of wanting to have this happen for in the Bonnie Briar property, but more than anything, it's a third world country. We can't even, if you want to call on a cell phone from Bonnie Briar Country Club and say, I'll be late or we have a problem, you can't do it. Larchmont's too good for that. We need to take it to at least a developed country. And I think this proposition will be good for the community. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. And just, I don't know if you noticed it before, but just to be clear that the applicant has agreed to place the emergency service antennas on the pole if it's approved, and even has agreed to do it rent-free and installation-free. All the town has to do is produce the hardware and I guess the cables. So hopefully the emergency service issues, if this is approved, will be dealt with. Rob, is there anybody else?
Yes, it does look like we have one more person in the attendees group who wants to speak at this time. Catherine Samuels, I will be promoting you to panelist status. Please let us know once you've secured your audio connection.
All right, have I accomplished that?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. You can even see me?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, I am, my name is Catherine Samuels and I live next to Janice Geldwart on Althea Lane. And with my husband, Jeremy Henderson, we've lived here for 25 years. And the man who spoke, I think just before me, maybe the time before that, when he said that living here for 25 years is like living in a third world country. That's exactly how we felt. And so it's not just a question of sort of a middle class convenience, you know, that we don't have that other people do, and it's not fair. It really has affected our family and probably thousands of people who live in this neighborhood and live in this area of Larchmont. And I'd like to start with livelihood, especially now in COVID, where not only my husband and I, but also my daughter live at home. And we can't all use the landline at the same time, and we're all working at home. And recently, and it's been very difficult, almost impossible, without having an effective. We can't function effectively. My daughter was recently fired from her job because she did not have reliable cell service. It was a very important job for her and for her livelihood, and also for her future. And she hasn't been able to find another job since, which is very difficult now. So I wanted to just bring it down to the realities of the inability to be able to function and to and the effect on our livelihood. The second thing is the safety issue, which has been mentioned a lot, and we've had so many safety issues over the 25 years we've been here with our children when they were younger, and at various places, and we couldn't reach them, and they couldn't reach us, and how scared they got, and how scared we got. But the most recent one is that this storm. I don't know if it was Janice or someone mentioned where our service was out, and my husband and I, for a couple of weeks, were not here, but our daughter was. And we went for almost 2 days not knowing whether or not she was okay. And we finally found, we did have damage on our property with, trees that came down, all sorts of things, but my daughter was okay. But what if she hadn't been? And the fear and living sort of in that insecure world for a long period of time is just not right. It's not a question of convenience. It's really a question of we now live in a world where you must have cell service. You absolutely must. And if you don't, there's a fair amount of suffering that is not necessary or shouldn't be necessary. So thank you very much, and I hope and pray that you all will successfully move forward with having a tower that will provide us the service we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samuels. A question, Mr. Kenny. Assuming before the end of this year, this thing is all approved, when do you anticipate we would have a functioning tower?
I have an applicant's representative. Klaus, could you speak to the construction timeline?
Yeah, hi, Klaus Wemmer. I'm regional manager with Homeland Towers. It usually takes 2 to 3 months to build a tower. And it's not continuous construction, but it goes in stages. The foundation goes in first.
Even in the winter?
Yes, through the winter.
Okay, so that what you're saying is that by sometime in the springtime, potentially we will have an operating tower, and
yes,
the problems that have been raised will be solved, at least for Verizon customers?
Yes, very much so. It is our hope that if this gets approved, we would start construction as soon as possible.
So I would add here that after you get everything up, it does take the carriers some time to get everything integrated into their network and everything optimized. So I think physical construction could get done in 3 months. Integrating and actually getting available for public service might add a couple more months to that, but it should be a fairly rapid process.
Okay, so late spring.
Late spring seemed to see if we could, if the 3 month timeline is kept to on the construction side.
But ultimately, we'll move as fast as we can. And we know that as soon as we get Verizon up and running, we do know that AT&T is probably going to be coming right on after.
Yeah, we expect to see you again.
Yes.
Okay. Rob, anybody further?
We do have one more person who has their hand raised, Mr. Jared Kutsen. I believe that this was the same person who I read the email into the record before. I will be promoting you to be a panelist. Please let us know once you establish your audio connection.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for taking the opportunity tonight to meet and discuss this. As all of my neighbors said, and they've been here for much longer than I have, this is an absolute necessity. As you said, my name is Jared Cutts, and I live on Sackett Drive with my wife, Melissa Lieber, and our 2 kids. We're new to the area. We've been here for about 3 years. And it is astonishing to be driving through not only this part of Larchmont, but other parts of the area and lose your cell reception. As Janice mentioned, my wife is one of those physicians. She's an emergency medicine physician in New York City. And to not have cell reception is a huge impediment to our daily lives. More of a concern to me, though, is actually the S-shaped curve on Weaver Street, where people often cross over the double yellow line. If there's an accident or an incident there, there's no way for those people to call for help unless they go and knock on somebody's door. And I think this cell phone tower also has implications for the Murray Avenue School. We lose our cell connection. Used to be right around Murray Avenue School. Now it's more at the Weaver-Murray split. But I can certainly see their safety implications for the teachers and the faculty and the staff and the parents in the school system. I am a first responder myself. I sit on a state council, and I can't implore this planning board enough to pass the resolution and ensure that this tower gets built for not only the residents but everybody who uses Weaver Street as a thoroughfare into and out of our town. So thank you all so much for the hard work, and I hope that you will pass this.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Okay, this will be the last call. Anybody who's in the attendee group for the meeting, please use the raise your hand function if you wish to provide any further comments. You can also send emails to the town's email account shown on my avatar, publicqc@townofmamaroneckny.org. I have not received, we do have actually a few emails that just came in. Okay, first email here is from Evan Levy. I am a resident of the town of Mamaroneck and live on Weaver Street across from Bonnie Bar Country Club. The absence of cell service in our area of the town during storms is a frequent challenge when our landline telephone internet service is disrupted. I support the installation of this cell tower to provide mobile phone service to our area of the town.
Okay.
We have another email from Becky Kirkham. Good evening. Thank you for taking these emails. I live at 18 Althea Lane, and I am a physician. I fully support this application. Echoing what others have said, living where we are has made taking call after hours and overnight very difficult and at times impossible. I could not take calls for the week following a storm this past summer. Countless calls have gone straight to voicemail, or I receive voicemails hours later. Thank you for your consideration of this important matter.
Is that it at this point?
That is all the emails that I've received, and there is nobody left in the attendees group who has their hand raised.
Mr. Kenny, I assume that you are used to going through public hearings where everybody speaks in favor?
Yeah, we always bring the best applications forward.
Good. Okay. Is there anybody on the board who has any further questions, comments, etc.? Okay, we now have a number of choices. One is to close the public hearing. Another is to leave it open for written communications only until our next meeting. In either case, we can authorize council to prepare a proposed resolution, and also we have a state environmental quality review process that has to be completed, which that could be done at the same time if we want to authorize that today, both of which would make it possible to resolve, actually any of these would make it possible to resolve everything at our next scheduled meeting, which is on December 9th. Is there anybody with any desire for one or the other? Ron?
Before I address that issue, I have a question. We had discussed in past meetings the idea of making the tower less visible along Weaver. Can the applicant address what's proposed to help address that issue, the visibility along Weaver?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So there has been some comments regarding what can be done with regards to landscaping. So the applicant is willing to contribute to the the town's tree fund for any off-site landscaping, because it was determined that landscaping off-site would probably have more benefit than landscaping on-site. And we'd like to make a contribution of $10,000 to the tree fund.
Ralph, has there been any discussion or thought behind, instead of doing a tree fund, including a landscape plan or a site plan that would reference the location of the trees?
Well, the town code actually requires a landscaping plan. So one of the things that would have to happen here is, if there isn't any, which so far there isn't any, the board would have to decide to waive that requirement, which it can do. But just to get to your point, Ron, as David just said, this is all, a contribution to the town's tree fund cannot be used on private property. It can be used in the environmental area, it can be used in the Larchmont Reservoir area and around the day camp. But there are clearly, I mean, in my view, are areas on the country club property along Weaver Street where additional plantings would reduce the amount of visibility of this tower. Clearly, you know, again, the applicant doesn't own the property, but the person who is leasing this property to the applicant does. So if you would like to pursue what you're talking about, and if the board would like to pursue what you're talking about, and we do have some time to do it, it's only the 17th of the month. And we can, if the board decides, waive the 14-day requirement stuff, so things could be done still on December 9th. You know, it would be possible to look, you know, have the applicant, well, at the moment, unfortunately, our town specialist in this stuff is ill. But to look into what could be done. I will tell you personally, I happened to drive down Weaver Street today because my wife and I were going someplace. And now that more leaves are down, there are places where there are holes in the evergreens, which could be plugged by more evergreens. And if they were, you wouldn't see a thing from Weaver Street. You know, we've discussed this over and over again at these meetings.
I think the last where we left it off, though, was we would decide to provide the off-site landscaping for the tree fund, but we also lowered the branches on the monopine an additional 10 feet so that we could lower it to its lowest point. Because as we've shown from the line of sight profiles, the areas that we're discussing where there may be visibility of the tower, it's through the trees. And again, we proposed a stealth design to have this whole facility resemble a tree. We can't make the facility invisible, but we have put up forth a stealth design that hides the equipment on the facility and has a stealth design that resembles a tree. And I think with all the views that we've shown on the visual analysis, if you're looking at the facility through trees, or even if you have a clear view of the facility, the tree stealth design really does a good job at making it so that it's less visible or at least less noticeable.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, I've been on the site more than once, and there is a whole line of evergreens, which is going to shield everything in the lower part. I mean, that's why we went to the 40-foot concept. There will be very little of the so-called trunk of the tree that will be visible from anywhere, unless you're basically standing right next to it.
Correct. And that would only be if you're in the maintenance area around the golf course. And again, the stealth design, we're going to paint what we'll call the trunk of the tree brown. And then there'll also be the faux branches. But again, we're covering all the antennas with those faux socks that'll have an additional stealth covering on the antennas and an additional, we'll call it minimizing of the visibility of the facility.
Yeah, in the same thing, again, and any proposed resolution will cover maintenance, you know, replacing the socks if they lose their, you know, all the sorts of things. And by the way, Ron, obviously, as a member of this board, you and every other member are going to see a draft of it before, you know, it ever gets done. But to try to make this as, try to make this as good as you can do it. But if you're going to have a 125-foot tree, it's not going to be invisible. And right? I mean, we're not Manhattan where you could build something 125 feet and nobody would notice. But, you know, that's the case. But Ron, if you want to say anything more, please do.
I personally would prefer, a landscape plan to be included in the application. I think whatever efforts we can undertake to make this less visible, the better for the community. And so in light of that, I would prefer to see a landscape plan. And I think it's important to have the trees located, along Weaver, an effort to do that.
Ira, Elizabeth, Ed, who am I missing? Sarah, comments, pro, con?
Yeah, I have a comment. I mean, I kind of agree with Ron. I think we should see a landscaping plan. And I actually have a question, and I probably should know the answer to this, but did the applicant give notice to all of the properties that will have the tree in their lines or the antenna in their line site? So for example, like, 5 Cornell, who happens to be on the call tonight for a different purpose, but they're going to have in every season a straight shot from their backyard of the antenna. So have they had to give notice to all these people that are going to be looking at it on a daily basis?
Yes,
It's given in accordance with the town law.
correct. And it's actually
to the neighbors, or?
Yes, but then they also send notice. They have to send notice to all landowners within X feet of the installation.
Well, it's actually X feet, I think, in this case of the country club. So it's much further from the installation. It's a huge list of people.
Yeah.
But it's not going to cover everybody who will potentially see the tower.
But 5 Cornell was included in that list.
Yeah, they are certainly, they border the country club. They're absolutely included in that list.
You know what, I would think Elizabeth isn't here right now, but perhaps Elizabeth could speak with the applicant about proposed plantings for a landscape plan.
She's the environmental, what's the title? Environmental consultant, environmental,
right.
I forget. Environmental planner.
I do appreciate the board's concern and focus on making sure that the visibility of the site is minimized, but I would like to, again, remind the board, it did hear from the public tonight, and we've heard many also written public comments and of the need for the facility and the need for it as quick as possible. I didn't hear any public comments regarding a fear of, a visibility concern along Weaver Street. And I do appreciate the board's concern and the requirement of the code, but I think that we've addressed this already at previous meetings by lowering the branch height and then by providing a sizable contribution of $10,000 for offsite landscaping in the tree fund. I do appreciate the board's concern, but again, no matter what landscaping is proposed, we can't wall off the entire golf course. I think by lowering the branches and providing the stealth design that we provided, we have addressed the visibility of this facility as best as we possibly can.
If I can just add to this, the way we placed this facility at the existing maintenance area, we particularly placed it in a spot that is already surrounded by evergreens. I think 30, 40 feet tall evergreens. So there is existing screening there as far as the compound goes and the bottom of the pole itself goes.
Ed, do you have any comments?
I don't usually agree with Mr. Kinney, but in this particular case, I have to agree with him. You are never going to screen that tower. So I think they did the best they can. If the public wants a cell tower, which it sounds like they do, I think the landscape plan is an exercise.
Ira, I don't think you spoke to this one.
Well, I'm going to echo Ed. I don't always agree with Ed, but this time I agree with him.
Okay. So look, one thing, I mean, the planting of trees, if it were to take place, would not delay the construction of the tower, right? The trees would be along Weaver Street, which has nothing whatsoever to do with the construction of the tower. Nor, it's also winter, so nobody's going to be planting trees in the middle of winter. So it would not be impossible to do both of these things at the same time. So I don't see, other than the fact of delaying approval, which is not what I think anybody's trying to do, or I may be wrong, that having the landscaping thing looked into further would be a problem. I don't know when Liz will be healthy enough to do this, hopefully soon. But again, I would say that, picking up with what Ron, Sarah, and Liz here somewhat said, it certainly could be made less visible. Yes, you can't possibly hide something that high, that tall, but you can largely hide it from somebody who's driving down Weaver Street simply by having a line of tall evergreens, because the line of sight at that point, you're so low, sitting in even an SUV, you won't see a thing. So it can go either way.
So are you proposing that the 10,000 that they're going to donate to the tree fund will be used for those plantings along Weaver Street? Is that what you're asking?
No, it can't be, because that's private property. It has to be used public property.
Ralph, you can accomplish that by making the requirement that, or the voluntary acceptance of the requirement that the applicant provide the funds to Bonnie Breyer, and Bonnie Breyer, which is not the applicant, but obviously has an interest in the application.
The landlord.
Use those funds for the purpose we were just discussing, including planting it on the periphery of their property as it borders Weaver Street.
I do appreciate this concern, but there are already trees along Weaver Street, in many areas that would kind of provide the same amount of screening that's being talked about today. And we already have a letter from the property owner when we already asked this question if we could do additional landscaping, and they stated they would not allow us to provide the landscaping. The areas that were in discussion would require landscaping on areas of the golf course that are playable areas. So we do have to respect the function and use of the underlying use here. And again, many areas along the golf course, they already have this arborvitae or already have some trees along the way. I think the focus from the board was that there was some views within the Sheldrake Environmental Center that we're seeing that may have a potential visibility because they're further away from these trees right along the border of Weaver Street. And that's where it was decided that the offsite landscaping would have the most benefit. I appreciate the board's concern, but I really believe that this is a question that's been asked and answered at previous meetings.
It most certainly has been discussed in previous meetings. There's no doubt about it. But let me just say here too, first of all, I've been advised by the country club, actually by the person who spoke today, that if we're talking about planting along Weaver Street, that's perfectly fine. We're planting in the middle of the golf course. That's not perfectly fine. Second, and this ties into something I really have raised before, the photos that were taken and presented to us were taken from carefully selected locations. If you take the photo you just showed us and go roughly 30 to 50 feet to the right in that photo, it's pretty much wide open once the leaves are off the trees. And
Ralph, I don't really have a problem with the tower there. This is not a walking area. The people are whipping by in their cars. If in fact it even strikes their consciousness as they're going, it's in and out in a second. The people don't walk along Weaver Street at that location.
Not if you want to live. But okay, folks, let's do it this way. I mean, we have a board vote. What is the view? This is not a matter of closing the hearing or so on, but just on the one issue. Okay, is the desire that the landscaping between Weaver Street and the tower be looked into further, in the form of a landscaping design or landscaping plan, or not. So if the answer is yes, please, I can't at this point because the screen's sharing, see everybody. But if the answer is you would like to have that done, please raise your hand. 1, 2. Okay, if you do not want to have that done, please raise your hand. 3. Okay, the answer is it's resolved.
Mr. Chairman, I also want just to point out that Mr. David Tolchin from the attendees group has raised his hand again, if he wishes to permit him to speak.
Okay, please, Mr. Cutson, please. You're muted at the moment.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Tolchin, I'm sorry. Yes, we can hear you.
I did raise my hand. I think the vote that was just taken moots my comment. But what I was going to say was exactly what had been said a few moments ago, is that there is a limited place where any plantings could occur without interfering with play on the golf course. So I say this in my capacity as a member of the Board of Governors of Bonnie Briar. And maybe it's now all moot because 3 members indicated they don't think a landscape plan is necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. Rob, is there anybody else at this point, or are we ready to proceed?
No one else at this time.
Okay. Lisa, is there any requirement that this stay open for written comments after today, or would it be possible for the public hearing to be closed this evening?
You want to leave the public hearing open for written comments?
No, the question is, are we obligated to leave it open for written comments, or if the board so determines, are we free to close the public hearing this evening?
Oh, the board is free to leave the public hearing open or to close it as it so chooses.
Okay. May I hear from members of the board as to what their desire one or the other would be?
Traditionally, I think we've been trying to be consistent. I think in consistency, I see no reason in this particular case. I think we should keep the hearing open.
Okay, next.
I would close the hearing where we've heard from the public, both in written letters and emails and online, and they voiced here, we've been at this for 3 or 4 months. I don't see any reason to keep it open. If we were going to keep it open, it should only be for additional written comments, which would have to be received 14 days before the next meeting.
Others?
Well, just to be clear, there's no requirement that that their comments need to be received 14 days before.
Yeah, they can be received all the way up to the day of the meeting. That's different because of this public hearing. It's not an application.
But we're also going to have a draft resolution by the next meeting, correct?
That will be dealt. That as soon as we get this one done, we're going to deal with that one.
And a draft resolution does not dictate that the board has to act on it. So if there's a draft resolution and new comments come in, those comments can be considered.
Right. That's why I would close it tonight completely.
Tara?
Well, I agree with Ed, and I think I agree with what Liz just said, but as a practical matter, one would think if there was strong or even moderate opposition, we would have heard something about it by now. Indeed, all we've heard are testimonials to what a good idea it is. So I don't think we need to expend any more time to develop the record. I think we should act with as much dispatch as we can muster to move this project along.
Sarah?
Well, I don't think it delays anything to leave the public hearing open if we're just going to be receiving written comments. We're still going to have the hearing in December. We're still going to have a meeting in December and have a draft resolution by then. So I would vote to keep it open.
Ron?
I agree with Sarah's comment.
Okay. So let's assume now, if we leave the public hearing open, there's no reason we cannot proceed, if the board so determines, to get what's called a negative declaration prepared in connection with the environmental matters, SEQA, and to have a draft resolution prepared so that everything potentially could be completed on December 9 anyway. The hearing could be closed and all of the rest of it could be done. So I think since there is no resolution that could be adopted tonight anyway, I don't think that the applicant actually loses anything. Unless we get some wild or, very different than we had tonight, written comments, but it would be left open for written comments only. Everybody else had a chance to attend today. I would say surprisingly few people did. And is the desire of the board then to have the SEQA papers and a draft resolution prepared and ready for the meeting of the 9th of December?
I agree with your proposal.
Why?
Yes.
Yes.
Ralph, would you consider entertaining a motion that sets a date by which the written comments should be received and spells out that the public hearing is only open with respect to written comments?
Absolutely. I think that we no reason to go through what we just went through tonight a second time. That's unfair to the applicant. So how about a motion which closes the public hearing except for written comments that are received, say by noon on the 9th, because they can be circulated to us. I don't expect there are going to be very many of them. And at the same time, requests Liz to prepare the papers in connection with SEQA and Lisa to prepare the papers in connection with the resolution. Can that all be done in one piece, Lisa?
Yes, but just to be clear, to specify that those papers are drafts to be considered and reviewed by the board, only drafts.
Absolutely. I mean, we also, if we get any written comments, we have to consider them as well. Can I have a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Raise hands, please. Opposed? Abstentions? I think we're done with this for the evening.
Thank you for your time, board. We'll see you on the 9th.
We'll see you on the 9th in any event.
Bye.
Thank you. Ralph, I'm assuming I'm not needed on the 9th.
You're not needed on the 9th. It's only written comments.
Thank you very
If we
much.
have any to ask you, we'll call you.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you
Good
for
night.
sticking around, Hank. You'll make your other meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll bring this to its end and now get to the other item on our agenda for this evening. Rob, you want to bring in whoever is here from 5 Cornell?
Certainly.
Now, while that's going on, can I ask if all the members of the board have received the draft resolution with respect to 5 Cornell and hopefully had a chance to review it if you got it?
Yes.
Has anybody not received it? Look at that one.
Ralph, can you note for the record that John Cuddy has rejoined us?
Oh, yes, John Cuddy, who had to recuse himself from the public hearing, is back with us now as a member of the planning board. So the only thing
Mr. Chairman. Good
Okay.
evening.
Good evening. Let me just, so it's clear. Public hearing closed. There's no presentation required. There's nothing that gets done today unless you want to do something, which you're obviously free to do, other than to consider a resolution which has been prepared in draft for potential adoption. If there's an issue with respect to that, please speak to it.
No, actually the opposite. First off, I just want to say good evening to yourself and the board. Thanks for putting us on the special agenda. As you know, you had the draft resolution initially at your last meeting. There were a couple of conditions that came up that we discussed with the board and with Mr. Wasp and your council. And as far as we're concerned, the revisions that were made to the previously drafted resolution are in keeping with our understanding, and we're just here to capture the vote. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the board who has any comments, etc., with respect to the resolution itself?
I do. Lisa, with respect to condition number 19, why do we need any language following the word illuminated?
I thought at least on the draft I have, there is no language after the word illuminated.
Neither. I don't have it on the draft either.
This was, this tract changes was sent, and there was a proposal to include language that says the tennis court shall not be illuminated throughout the duration of the use of the property. I don't have strong feelings about leaving it in or taking it out. So if people, that was a proposal, but it's in my view, it's not necessary if the board members want to take it out. So I would be open to either.
Whose proposal was it?
I made the proposal, Ira. It seemed to me that as it was initially drafted, it was ambiguous as to what the intention of the.
Interesting, John, because I asked myself 5 times, what the hell does that mean? And I thought it was too ambiguous. Just the statement that it shall not be illuminated seems to shed light on the subject, so to speak, for all time. I don't know what it means throughout the duration of the use of the property.
Well, I was picking up from another condition that used that same language.
Anybody else have comments with respect to this one way or the other? It's what happens when you have a board that's full of lawyers.
No.
No, I'm good.
So which way?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with the resolution.
As is.
As is. And what is the so that we all have this right language, that what is that sentence, or if it's a sentence legally or grammatically in the present final proposed version of this resolution, Lisa?
So the last version that was circulated with track changes has number 19 reading that the tennis court shall not be illuminated throughout the duration of the use of the property. The prior version had a period after illuminated. The prior version said the tennis court shall not be illuminated.
And just to be clear, my proposed addition of the language was drawn from condition number 20, the first sentence, which uses the identical language.
I mean, I personally don't see a downside to adding the language that John has proposed. I think it makes it clear. I think it probably is clear anyway, but it makes it at least as clear. I don't see Ira as that making it any more, making it ambiguous. It simply says, it adds that this is a permanent condition.
If a certain lawyer who's not appearing before us tonight were assigned to this matter, I think he would argue that it's not being illuminated throughout the use of the property. It's only being illuminated at certain times when people are playing on the court and light is necessary to be able to play.
I think we're fortunate that the lawyer is not here this evening.
That argument could not be made. It's ended after the word illuminated.
Okay, folks, which way do you want to have it? We take a straw thing, we don't do it one way or the other. Ira, obviously, you do not want the additional language. Elizabeth?
Either way, I don't see it's a significant improvement or a detriment.
Ron?
Doesn't matter. I say we leave it the way it is and we vote.
Ed? Ed, we can't hear you.
The only reason you couldn't hear me is that I was muted.
That's a good reason.
Which is sometimes a good thing. But anyway, just keep it short and sweet.
Sarah?
Yeah, I don't think we need the extra clause.
That was right down the middle. That's wonderful. Okay, in this case, I guess we'll break the tie. I think we can do fine without the extra language at this point. So can I have a motion to adopt the resolution as proposed with the wording and with the sentence ending after the word illuminated?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed, please raise your hand. Abstentions, please raise your hand. It's approved. Thank you all. I hope you enjoy your house.
Thank you all very much on behalf of my clients. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Liz, was that you who seconded it?
No.
It was me, Lisa. Ed Papazi.
Oh, it was you. Okay, so Ira and Ed?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there anything else anybody wants to
Nice evening.
discuss this evening? Otherwise, folks, we're done. It's not even 8:30. Pretty good. Better than last meeting.
Definitely.
And everybody's.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
See you on the
Good night, everybody.
Good
Night all.
Good night.